The regime has fired on large crowds before. It has killed hundreds to intimidate millions. This pattern has repeated again and again. We must not repeat the same scenario. We're on. Hello. The time when the US administration itself seems uncertain about negotiations with the Iranian authorities and whether there is any need to start a new wave of military pressure or even bombard Iran again, we're hearing louder and louder calls for adapting a strategy of regime change. In this episode, I want to analyze how likely such a strategy is to be effective and what factors could actually bring about regime change in Iran. First, we need to understand one essential point. This is not a normal regime. You cannot expect its leaders to make reasonable decisions under economic or military pressure. You cannot expect moderates to rise to power because of sanctions or negotiations. This logic simply doesn't apply here. I don't know whether Donald Trump truly believed that US Israel pressure had empowered moderate figures inside the regime to pursue peace talks and choose a better future for their country. What I do know is that it didn't take long for him to abandon that belief and return to speak to the regime in the only language it understands, the language of force. There are several factors that could work in favor of a regime change strategy. First, the people are overwhelmingly against the regime. This is not speculation. This is supported by real events. We saw mass demonstrations across Iran, especially in major cities like Tehran, Mashhad, Tabriz, Isfahan, and many others. In 2009, this became known as the Green Movement. After that, the country witnessed major protests every 2 or 3 years, culminating in the Women Life Freedom Movement that began in Kurdish cities and spread across the country. And recently, the world witnessed massive demonstrations again, brutally suppressed by the regime. I believe the regime's propaganda claiming that Iranians have united behind it against the US and Israel. Even regime officials admit that most people oppose them, but they try to argue that people blame the foreign countries more than they blame the regime itself for their suffering. But we should remember, despite heavy bombardments and external pressures last year, people still came to the streets to show their opposition. And now, even more people are frustrated because they know the main cause of their suffering is the regime in Tehran, the ideological leadership, and the IRGC. Second, the illusion of change through election is over. For 47 years, the IRGC has effectively controlled the country, but the regime managed to mislead parts of the population into believing that change could come through ballot boxes, controlled elections, pre-approved candidates, and a political theater designed to create false belief, false hope, I mean. Today, that illusion is gone. It's clear that the president has no power. The country is effectively run by IRGC commanders, while the supreme leader's condition and authority are uncertain. The election strategy that kept people patient for decades no longer works. Third, the economy is in worse shape than ever. Is the economy better today than it was when millions of people came to the streets in past protests? Obviously not. Even optimistic assessments suggest that it takes decades for Iran's economy to recover to pre-war or pre-sanctions levels. Iranians understand the regime better than any outside analyst. They have lived under its radicalism, its ideology, and its violence. They know that if the regime hadn't pursued destructive regional policies and brutally suppressed its own people, much of this suffering and conflict would never have happened. So, no, people haven't united behind the regime because of foreign attacks. They oppose it more strongly than ever. They're desperate for a way out. But here is the hard truth: regime change will not happen easily. The regime has taken the country hostage. It doesn't hesitate to kill. It has done so repeatedly for decades. Some opposition figures abroad claim that if enough people gather in the streets, the regime will not dare to fire on them. It's simply not true. The regime has fired on large crowds before. It has killed hundreds to intimidate millions. This pattern has repeated again and again. We must not repeat the same scenario where unarmed people are encouraged into the streets only to be massacred. Real change cannot happen without organized, trained, and supported opposition forces. This is where armed and structured opposition groups become relevant, including Kurdish opposition groups, which hold strategic geographic positions, and organizations such as the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. Recently, figures like Mariam Rajavi and Kurdish political leaders were speaking at the European Parliament about Iran's future. These are examples of organized opposition that could play a role if real support exists. In conclusion, change in Iran is possible, but not through slogans and not through spontaneous street protests alone. It requires continued economic and military pressure from outside, organized opposition inside, and realistic understanding of how this regime operates. If you have any question about today's discussion or anything related to Iran, feel free to leave a comment.